Kaustubh Belapurkar of Morningstar Investment Advisers joins us right now. Kaustubh, appreciate you taking this time out this early in the morning. How have you read into this move?
So Neeraj, I think an interesting move, and obviously for unit holders of the FMPs, something to cheer about because they weren't sure when that portion of the money would come back to them. There was a lot of uncertainty. So in terms of that, sentimentally, for a mutual fund investor, yes, I think a good move. But like you just pointed out, that this is something that hasn't happened for a while. It did happen in the erstwhile era, but maybe a decade ago when exposures were much smaller and investors were kind of used to expecting that the AMC would take on the risk on their books. I don't think we're living in that world anymore. So I don't think this will be something that will be continued, going forward all the time. These are, obviously unusual circumstances. You might have a one-off thing, but we don't see this being the norm, in these days.
There are two things, and we'll talk about the stock piece with somebody else, but just from a perspective of an FMP shareholder. Now, what does this do when you are advising people who might have exposure to schemes which had exposure to Essel Group, essentially, across AMCs? Would you believe that what HDFC AMC has done is something that people will now start expecting everybody else to do as well? And does that kind of cushion any kind of concerns that FMP holders would have when they're holding schemes which has the Essel paper?
So, like I said, I think this is probably going to be a little bit one-offish. I don't think, because, given the size of the exposures now that, funds carry, it's going to be very hard to take everything and anything on their books, and it wouldn't be the right thing to do. I think, obviously, HDFC's come from that. There's been a huge sentimental impact. We look at the industry, there's been so much negativity that's been around from investors in terms of money moving out of different kinds of funds. So, at least sentimentally, it will kind of hopefully go to, alleviate some of the concerns that, investors should feel, okay, that there is something that can be done. But, I don't think this should be the norm, because clearly, I think here in this case, probably HDFC has some comfort around that, either they're very close to inking a deal where they can, that standstill agreement should kind of pay off, or, worst case scenario, sell off the pledged shares to make good what they're taking on their books.
Do you think, Kaustubh, that this in any way helps in softening the impact of the SEBI proceedings against HDFC?
Okay. I'm not sure if I'll be able to comment on the exact nuances of that, so I'll let that go.
Fair call, no problem. Just one final question, Kaustubh. If indeed, while it seems that, or while everybody is hopeful that such instances of resolutions or inking of a deal, etc., will not happen in the future, but going by the scheme of things, there might be a possibility that some other, there's never one cockroach, right? There are more. So what if some other instances like this happen? Do you think HDFC AMC individually has now set a precedent for itself if indeed something like this happens in the future? Now, I know this is not unusual because I think Franklin Templeton had done this when it came to JSPL's case back in 2016 as well. Maybe there are some other instances that I'm missing out as well. Has HDFC AMC set a precedent, if not for the industry, then for itself?
I would say yes and no. That's where it's very important to manage the expectations of investors. That, this, given just the times that we're in, there's so much negative noise, and like I said, the outflows have been huge. Sentimentally, it's probably a good thing that, there is something like this happening. But, again, I would want to take that as a pinch of salt, saying that, this is not something investors should come to expect going on. So, that should be a messaging that should probably come out very clearly, once the dust settles around this, that, this happened, we want to be with you, but this is not something that should be expected, in every case that happens. Because, credit risk is something that we keep talking about. That is a part and parcel of investing. You need to be prepared for that. Just the other thing that which I probably want to seek more clarity on is, they've written about the valuation at which they would buy the bonds. Now, I want to keep an eye on that because clearly, we've seen some rating downgrade as recently as the end of May on these two instruments. So I'd be keen to see at what valuation does the mutual fund AMC actually buy out the bonds and deliver to investors. Okay.
We'll leave it at that, Kaustubh. Thanks a lot for joining us and giving us that perspective.
Sure. Thanks.